Okay, great. Then, good evening, everybody. So I want to start my talk by telling you all a story. And that story is about a man named John here. Now, John was born in 1923 in England, in Hartlepool in England. He served in the war, and he won an MBE for his efforts to public service. He was a rugby lover and an avid cricket fan, watching every weekend the game on television. But as John got older, he realised that he couldn't remember his way home from the local shop. And he forgot how to drive his car. He started to ask the same questions over and over again, not remembering he just asked them 5 minutes ago. We lost my grandpa before we really lost him, and the reason for that is Alzheimer's disease. And sadly, my grandpa's story is an all too common one. In fact, there may even be people in the audience that have a very similar one to tell. And this is because Alzheimer's disease is a major problem. In fact, it's the 5th leading cause of death globally, and on average, every 65 seconds, someone is diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. But of course, Alzheimer's disease is not the only neurodegenerative disease out there. In fact, the list is extremely long. For example, you may recognize some of these here. Parkinson's disease, ALS, this is the disease that affected Stephen Hawking. But these diseases have something in common, and that is that each one has an aggregating protein involved. This protein, it aggregates, it sticks together, and it does so in a specific population of neurons. And then these neurons die. And the neurons that die link to the symptoms. So for example, in Alzheimer's disease, it's mostly the neurons that are involved in memory that are affected. These neurons then die, and hence why most patients have memory loss, such as my grandpa. Whereas these other diseases that I've named here, it's mostly motor neurons that are affected. Hence why the symptoms shown here are mostly of motor in nature. For example, the tremor in Parkinson's disease. And so during my master's, I have been doing some reading, and it struck me how many similarities all of these diseases have. In fact, I thought there's too many coincidences going on here. And so perhaps instead of viewing these diseases as separate, we should view them as something like this. That they're a family of diseases that are interlinked and connected, perhaps with some underlying common mechanism. Of course, I'm not the only one that thinks like this, and in one paper I read, they described it nicely like this, that you can think of these vulnerable populations of neurons as standing on a catastrophic cliff edge, and they just need a slight push from stress or aging or genetics to topple those neurons over that cliff edge and into neuronal death. So what could one of those factors be pushing those neurons over that cliff edge? Well, recycling. Well, more specifically, protein degradation and recycling. So we thought that we came up with recycling, but no, actually Mother Nature did a long time ago in the form of the proteasome. So this is the Fant machine of the cell, if you like. And what it does is it takes proteins that are perhaps being overproduced or they're misfolded, and it degrades them into peptides, which can then be recycled back into protein. But of course, we need to know which bottles we can recycle, and in a similar vein, we need to know which proteins should be degraded. So the biology Fant sticker, if you like, is called ubiquitin, and it's added by a particular enzyme, shown here by Pac-Man, to our protein, and then this is waving saying, hey, I'm ready to be degraded, and the proteasome knows that it should now degrade this protein. And I'm sure, as you can imagine, this balance between production of protein and degradation needs to be maintained. And if it isn't, and it becomes imbalanced, for example, in this situation, that proteasome is not working and not enough protein is being degraded, and instead it's building up, then this can cause major problems in the brain. So what evidence is there for proteasomal dysfunction in neurodegenerative diseases? Of course, I wouldn't be giving this talk if there wasn't any. So actually there's a lot. So let's go back to Alzheimer's disease, the disease that affected my grandpa. So you have at the top there, A-beta, this is one of the proteins involved in Alzheimer's disease, and it aggregates. That's the green picture there. And it also gets labelled with those Fant stickers. So it's covered in Fant stickers, and yet They're just building up. It's not being got rid of. You can think of it like bottles after a party, for example. And this is a common theme, a recurring theme in many of the neurodegenerative diseases. The same in Huntington's disease. We have in red, aggregating protein, covered in plant stickers, but not being degraded. Same in Parkinson's disease, with alpha-synuclein, aggregating, building up, getting labeled to be degraded, but not being degraded. And finally, the same in ALS, that disease that affected Stephen Hawking. It's the same story there. But of course, when we think of neurodegenerative diseases, we are thinking about old people and genetics. But I can link the proteasome to these two factors as well. So it's been shown that as we age, our proteasome system gets worse over time. So you can think of this as accelerating that process of neurodegeneration and pushing those neurons over the cliff edge. And similarly, genetics, so mutations in the proteasome, have also been directly linked to many neurodegenerative diseases as well. So to summarize my talk, I think that we should view the situation something like this, with common underlying mechanisms. For example, the one I presented today would be proteasomal dysfunction, and this is accelerated by aging and genetics. So to finish my talk, I want to stick with the theme of dementia, and I want to test your memory. At the beginning, I gave a fact, which was to do with how often someone is diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. Can anybody remember? Yeah.
65 seconds.
Yeah, 65 seconds, exactly. Thank you. Somebody's listening. So that means since I've been talking, roughly 5 people have been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. So I think that this gives me grounds to say that this really is a ticking time bomb that's waiting to explode if it hasn't already exploded. And with an aging population, the burden of neurodegenerative diseases is only going to get worse. Thank you for listening to my talk. I hope you learned something.